Alexander the Great, born in 356 BCE in Pella, Macedonia, was the son of Philip II and Olympias. He received education from Aristotle, developing an interest in philosophy and science. In 340 BCE, he demonstrated military prowess by defeating the Mede during his father's absence. At the Battle of Chaeronea in 338 BCE, he played a key role in Philip's victory over Greek states. Despite personal conflicts, Alexander and his mother initially fled to Epirus, but later reconciled with Philip. The relationship remained tense due to succession concerns. Alexander would go on to become a legendary figure, conquering the Persian Empire and laying the foundations for the Hellenistic world before his death in 323 BCE in Babylon. His life became the subject of both historical accounts and legendary tales. Alexander the Great was hailed as a god for several reasons. One factor was his extraordinary military success and conquests, which seemed almost superhuman to the people of his time. His ability to lead his armies to victory across vast territories, including the defeat of the mighty Persian Empire, contributed to the perception of his divine prowess. Moreover, Alexander himself encouraged the belief in his divine status. He adopted certain Persian customs, such as proskynesis, a form of bowing or prostration, which was a gesture reserved for deities in Persian culture. This blending of Greek and Persian traditions fueled the notion that he possessed divine qualities. The Oracle of Siwa in Egypt played a role in reinforcing the idea of Alexander's divinity. According to historical accounts, the oracle declared him the son of Zeus, further legitimizing his godlike status. The notion of Alexander as a god also served political purposes. It helped him solidify his control over diverse regions with different religious beliefs. By presenting himself as a deity, or a chosen one of the gods, he could bridge the gap between various cultures and establish a unifying force under his rule. Alexander the Great had long harbored the ambition of conquering Persia, fueled by both a desire for wealth and a belief in the vulnerability of the Persian Empire. The need to maintain the army built by his father, Philip, and settle debts further motivated him. The exploits of Greek soldiers and the success of Agesilaus of Sparta in Persian territories had shown that Persia could be conquered. In the spring of 334 BCE, Alexander crossed the Dardanelles with a formidable army, leaving Antipater in charge in Europe. His army of about 30,000 foot soldiers and 5,000 cavalry, including Macedonians and Greek League allies, was a well-balanced force. The cavalry, supported by light-armed troops, played a crucial role in pitched battles, with infantry phalanx and royal battalions serving as the core. Parmenio, a trusted general, was Alexander's second in command. The army was not just a fighting force, it included various professionals, such as surveyors, engineers, architects, scientists, court officials, and historians, suggesting Alexander's vision of a comprehensive operation. Alexander's first encounter with the Persians occurred at the Granicus River. Despite a Persian plan to lure him across the river and defeat him, Alexander emerged victorious. This victory opened up Western Asia Minor to the Macedonians, with cities surrendering and tyrants being expelled. Alexander implemented a pan-Hellenic policy, symbolized by dedicating armor sets to Athena in Athens. Although cities nominally regained autonomy, Alexander maintained control, appointing satraps and solidifying his claim to succeed the great king of Persia. Alexander faced resistance in some areas, like Miletus, but he strategically dismantled his navy and focused on occupying coastal cities to neutralize the Persian fleet. In Caria, Halicarnassus resisted, but Alexander stormed it. He also won the support of Ada, the widow and sister of the satrap Idrius, in the region. Despite pockets of resistance, Alexander's campaign in Asia Minor marked the beginning of his Persian expedition, setting the stage for further conquests. In the winter of 334 to 333 BCE, Alexander continued his conquest of Western Asia Minor, overcoming the hill tribes of Lycia and Pisidia. In the spring of 333 BCE, he advanced along the coastal road to Perga, passing the cliffs of Mount Climax, with the aid of a favorable change in wind. The fall in the sea level was interpreted as a divine favor by Alexander's supporters, including the historian Callisthenes. At Gordium in Phrygia, there is a legendary account of Alexander cutting the Gordian knot, a knot that was said to only yield to the person destined to rule Asia. Whether this story is accurate or apocryphal remains uncertain. Around this time, Alexander benefited from the death of Memnon, the capable Greek commander of the Persian fleet. Moving from Gordium to Ancyra, modern Ankara, and then south through Cappadocia, and the Cilician Gates, modern Kulek Boğazı, Alexander faced a setback due to fever in Cilicia. Simultaneously, Darius led his grand army northward on the eastern side of Mount Amanus. Both sides had faulty intelligence, and Alexander, encamped by Myriandrus, near modern Iskenderun, Turkey, learned that Darius was blocking his communications at Issus, north of his position, in the autumn of 333 BCE. Turning back, Alexander found Darius positioned along the Pinaris River. The ensuing Battle of Issus resulted in a decisive victory for Alexander. The conflict turned into a Persian rout, and Darius fled, leaving his family in Alexander's hands. Despite the animosity between them, Alexander treated Darius's family, particularly the women, with chivalrous care. The Battle of Issus marked a significant turning point in Alexander's conquest, solidifying his dominance over the Persian forces and setting the stage for further campaigns into the heart of the Persian Empire. Continuing his conquest after the Battle of Issus, Alexander marched south into Syria and Phoenicia with the goal of isolating the Persian fleet and rendering it ineffective. He succeeded in bringing several Phoenician cities under his control, including Marathus and Aradus. Parmenio, one of Alexander's generals, was dispatched to secure Damascus and its rich spoils. When Tyre resisted Alexander's entry into the island city, he initiated a prolonged siege that lasted 7 months. The Tyrians displayed staunch resistance, and the eventual storming of Tyre in July 332 marked one of Alexander's greatest military achievements. The city faced significant destruction, and its women and children were sold into slavery. After leaving Parmenio in Syria, Alexander proceeded south, without encountering opposition, until he reached Gaza. The city's strong resistance stalled his advance for 2 months, and during a sortie, Alexander sustained a severe shoulder wound. There is no historical basis for the tradition that he visited Jerusalem during this time. In November 332 BCE, Alexander reached Egypt, where he was welcomed as a liberator. The Persian satrap Mzasis surrendered, and Alexander organized Egypt, employing Egyptian governors while keeping the army under separate Macedonian command. He founded the city of Alexandria, strategically located between the sea and Lake Merotis. Alexander spent the winter in Egypt, conducting religious and administrative activities. In the spring of 331 BCE, he returned to Tyre, appointed a Macedonian satrap for Syria, and prepared to advance into Mesopotamia. By completing the conquest of Egypt, Alexander solidified his control over the entire eastern Mediterranean coast. In July 331, he was at Thapsacus on the Euphrates, and instead of taking the direct route to Babylon, he moved across northern Mesopotamia toward the Tigris. Darius, informed of Alexander's movement, marched up the Tigris to oppose him. The decisive Battle of Gaugamela took place on October 31, 331 BCE, on the plain between Nineveh and Arbela. Alexander's victory forced Darius to flee, and Alexander pursued the Persian forces to Arbela. After occupying Babylon, Alexander moved through Persia, capturing Susa and Persepolis. At Persepolis, he symbolically burned down Xerxes's palace, marking the end of the Pan-Hellenic War of Revenge. Alexander continued his conquest into Media and occupied its capital. Thessalian and Greek allies were sent home, and Alexander shifted toward a more personal war, envisioning a joint ruling people consisting of both Macedonians and Persians. While pursuing Darius, who had retreated into Bactria, Alexander received news that Bessus, the satrap of Bactria, had deposed Darius. After a skirmish near Sha with Macron Hrd, Darius was stabbed by Bessus and left to die. Alexander sent Darius's body for an honorable burial at Persepolis. After the death of Darius, Alexander claimed the title of Great King, as indicated by a Rhodian inscription from the year 330 BCE. His Asian coins soon bore the title of king, marking his control over the Persian Empire. Alexander crossed the Elburz Mountains to the Caspian, seizing Zadrakata in Hyrcania and receiving the submission of various satraps and Persian notables. He advanced rapidly, reducing Satybarzanes in Aria and founding Alexandria of the Aryans, modern Hurt. In Frada in Drangiana, he took steps to eliminate Parmenio and his family. Alexander's ruthless actions included executing Parmenio's son, Philotas, who was implicated in an alleged plot against Alexander's life. Cleander, Parmenio's second-in-command, was also instructed to assassinate Parmenio. This brutal move eliminated Parmenio's adherents and strengthened Alexander's position. Continuing eastward, Alexander moved through the valley of the Helmand River, Arachosia, and over the mountains into the land of the Parapamisadi. There, he founded Alexandria by the Caucasus. Bessus, in Bactria, had raised a national revolt with the title of Great King. Crossing the Hindu Kush, Alexander pursued Bessus, who fled beyond the Oxus. Alexander appointed loyal satraps in Bactria and Aria. Sending his general Ptolemy in pursuit of Bessus, who had been overthrown by Spitamenes, Alexander moved west to Bactria's Ariaspa. Bessus was captured, flogged, and later mutilated after the Persian manner before being executed. Alexander continued his conquest, reaching Maracanda and the Jaxartes, where he founded Alexandria Eschate. Spitamenes, a determined opponent, raised Sogdiana in revolt. It took until the autumn of 328 BCE for Alexander to crush the opposition. In the same year, he attacked Arxiates in Paratocene. The conflict concluded with Alexander marrying Arxiates' daughter, Roxana, and either winning over or defeating the remaining opponents. During this time, an incident at Maracanda deepened the divide between Alexander and his Macedonians. In a drunken quarrel, he murdered Cletus, a trusted commander, leading to a posthumous conviction of treason for Cletus by the army. Alexander's attempt to impose Persian court ceremonial, including prostration, on the Greeks and Macedonians caused further discord. Callisthenes, who had connections to Aristotle, refused to comply, leading to his execution or death in prison. These events marked Alexander's progression toward Eastern absolutism and his adoption of Persian customs, which fueled discontent among his Macedonian companions.
In early summer 327 BCE, Alexander left Bactria with a reinforced army, probably around 35,000 strong, and reorganized his command. Crossing the Hindu Kush, he divided his forces, sending half through the Khyber Pass with commanders Hephaestion and Perdiccas, while leading the rest himself through the hills to the north. He successfully stormed the almost impregnable Aornos, a pinnacle west of the Indus. In spring 326 BCE, Alexander crossed the Indus near Attock and entered Taxila. He fought his last great battle on the left bank of the Hydaspes in June, founding two cities, Alexandria Nicaea and Bucephala, and forming an alliance with Porus, the ruler of the region. Despite his desire to explore further into India, his army mutinied at the Hyphasis, modern Beas, river, weary from the tropical rain. Coenus, one of Alexander's chief marshals, served as their spokesperson, and Alexander, faced with adamant resistance, agreed to turn back. On the Hyphasis, Alexander erected altars to the 12 Olympian gods, and on the Hydaspes, he built a fleet of 800 to 1,000 ships. Leaving Porus, he sailed down the river into the Indus, with Nearchus commanding the fleet. The march was marked by fighting and heavy casualties, and Alexander suffered a severe wound during the storming of a town near the Hydrotes, Ravi, river. Upon reaching Patala, at the head of the Indus Delta, Alexander built a harbour and explored both arms of the river. His plan was to lead part of his forces back by land, while Nearchus sailed along the Persian Gulf with a portion of the fleet. Nearchus faced local opposition and set sail in September 325 BCE, experiencing delays due to the monsoon. Alexander, following the coast through Gedrosia, modern Balakistan, turned inland as the region proved inhospitable. Craterus, another officer, was sent ahead with baggage and troops to rejoin the main army. The march through Gedrosia became disastrous, with waterless desert, food shortages, and suffering. Many, especially women and children, perished in a sudden monsoon flood. Alexander was eventually rejoined by Nearchus and the fleet at the Amanis River, having endured losses during their respective journeys. After returning from India, Alexander continued his policy of replacing officials and executing defaulting governors. Between 326 and 324 BCE, over a third of his satraps were superseded, and 6 were put to death. He displayed increasing severity against his governors, which was viewed unfavorably by some ancient sources. In spring 324 BCE, back in Susa, Alexander faced issues such as the treasurer Harpalus absconding with mercenaries and funds to Greece. At a feast celebrating the seizure of the Persian Empire, he furthered his policy of racial fusion by marrying Persian women. This policy, aiming to merge Macedonians and Persians into one master race, caused friction with the Macedonians who resented the integration of Persians into the army and administration. Alexander's determination to incorporate Persians on equal terms led to discontent among the Macedonians, heightened by the arrival of 30,000 native youths with Macedonian military training. The incorporation of Asians into the companion cavalry and the acceptance of Persian nobles into the royal cavalry bodyguard fueled tensions. The situation reached a breaking point at Opis in 324 BCE, resulting in an open mutiny. When Alexander dismissed his entire army and enrolled Persians instead, the opposition crumbled. To reconcile, Alexander held a vast banquet with 9,000 guests, celebrating the partnership in government between Macedonians and Persians. 10,000 veterans were sent back to Macedonia with gifts, resolving the crisis temporarily. In 324 BCE, Alexander attempted to address the issue of wandering mercenaries with a decree requiring Greek cities to receive back political exiles. He also planned to recall Antipater and replace him with Craterus. However, Alexander died in June 323 BCE before these plans could be executed. Following Hephaestion's death in 324 BCE, Alexander indulged in extravagant mourning for his closest friend. He continued to entertain the idea of his own divinity, demanding divine honors from the Greeks, leading to increasing megalomania and emotional instability. In the winter of 324 BCE, Alexander conducted a punitive expedition against the Cossians in Lauriston. In the spring of 323 BCE, he received embassies from various regions, and he made plans to improve irrigation, settle the Persian Gulf coast, and establish sea communications with India. Suddenly, in Babylon, Alexander fell ill after a prolonged banquet and drinking bout. He died on June 13, 323 BCE, at the age of 32, having reigned for 12 years and 8 months. His death marked the beginning of a period of instability as no heir had been appointed to the throne. His generals adopted Philip Aridius and Alexander IV as kings, leading to the fragmentation of the empire into independent kingdoms ruled by the generals. Alexander the Great, a brilliant military tactician and strategist, left a profound impact on the ancient world. His plans for universal conquest and exploration of regions like Arabia and the Caspian hinted at ambitious visions, although many details remain uncertain. In organizing his empire, Alexander improvised in various aspects but implemented a successful financial policy, introducing a new coinage system that stimulated trade. The foundation of over 70 new cities initiated a significant chapter in Greek expansion, spreading Hellenic influence across Asia. However, Alexander's plans for racial fusion failed, as the Macedonians rejected the idea, leading to Greek dominance in the later Seleucid Empire. His death prevented him from addressing the challenge of coordinating his vast and diverse dominions. What held the empire together was Alexander's dynamic personality, marked by an iron will, flexibility, imagination, and romantic impulses. Despite his ruthless and sometimes tyrannical behavior, he maintained the loyalty of his men. As a general, Alexander showcased extraordinary versatility, adapting tactics to diverse enemies and demonstrating skillful and imaginative strategy. His conquests had far-reaching consequences, reshaping the geopolitical landscape, advancing scientific knowledge, and spreading Hellenism across a vast territory, laying the groundwork for later historical developments, including the Roman Empire, the spread of Christianity, and the Byzantine era.